Gank fights. Oh, gank fights. Typically a lock for the worst boss in any game, developers largely still seem unaware of how to deliver an enjoyable fight against multiple enemies, but there are certainly a few exceptions, a small collection of encounters that shirk the trend and actually present an entertaining battle against a group of foes. So today I'll be exploring those fights with my 10 favourite gank bosses in gaming history. A few honourable mentions first. Bell Gargoyles is an absolute classic and refined the pretty poor fight against the man-eaters that was its predecessor. The Walker of Illusions from Lies of P is a boss the community seems to despise, but I actually think it's a really strong one of the best in that game. Most of Silksong's gank fights are terrible, but the Clover Dancers are actually a good expansion on a boss that will be featured on this list. Finally, there's the Angel and Demon from Cuphead's DLC, one of the most unique and innovative ganks gaming has to offer. Those out of the way, let's dive into the top 10. The Demon Princes are often praised as the most underrated boss in Dark Souls 3, and I can see the merit of that statement. They're a very well balanced gank, followed by a one-on-one beast fight with a solid moveset. The managing of the boss's aggression is what makes this fight work so well, as unlike bosses like the Godskin Duo or Valiant Gargoyles, the demons have altering states of aggression, so you'll only be under direct pressure from one at a time. While the balancing of this fight is incredible, I don't find the demon's moveset quite as enjoyable to interact with as those of the bosses higher on this list. Likely not a boss many would have expected to see on this list. Unlike the other ganks we'll feature in today's video, the two that remain don't really have any rules restricting their AI. They each function as a standard boss type enemy, and don't really respond to each other's movements. That's typically a recipe for an awful gank fight, but there's something about this duo that just makes them feel so fair. I think a large contributor is their telegraphs being much longer than standard for video game enemies, allowing the player plenty of time to consider how to best position themselves around their two opponents. Being able to roll through the larger of the two is also a needed touch, since it presents them the opportunity to reduce the threat he poses if they can time their rolls effectively. Individually, all the moves of this duo are really well considered and more engaging than most of the fights in this game. Together they surprisingly blend really well, even if all evidence suggests they shouldn't. This fight's just really fun, one of the best in either of these games, so I think it earns its spot on this list. Lady Ethereal is easily one of Nine Souls' best bosses, and she's enhanced by the phenomenal combat this game has to offer. It's probably my favourite combat system of any 2D game, and this boss uses it to its fullest potential. Every tool the player has is crucial to overcoming this challenge, one that's an immense step up in difficulty compared to everything you fought prior. She's an endurance fight through and through, with 3 phases that continuously get harder as the fight goes on. To beat Ethereal, you'll really want to get through our first 2 phases with all your heals left, since the third is utterly brutal. But unlike so many other poor ganks, all the clones' attacks work with perfect synergy. The player never gets forced into a situation where damage is impossible to avoid. Everything she has to offer comes with a clear counter, and as a result the fight's difficulty entirely revolves around the player's own skill, as any good boss should. Lady Ethereal just presents you with such an incredibly perfect flow of combat. All her attacks feel great to engage with. On top of that is her pretty solid lore and excellent visual design. She's just a really good fight in all areas, but I do think those higher on the list do most things better. Lies of P failed to impress me with its premier gank fights against the Black Rabbit Brotherhood. They each take very creative approaches, I just don't enjoy them much mechanically. This game also left me disappointed with its DLC, though as stated in my boss ranking, that certainly doesn't apply to Overture's bosses. Markiona is the best the expansion has to offer aside from Arlecchino, and she fits the bill of a gank boss in every way. I think the single best touch they made in this fight's design was the strings connecting the two enemies. Without this added element to clarify the telegraphs, it could have easily become overwhelming, but the strings flashing red is such an excellent design element that enhances the fight so much. I've had my complaints about how tight Lies of P's parry windows are in relation to the speed at which attacks come out following tells, but honestly I didn't find any issue with it here. All of Markiona's attacks just feel so intuitive to parry, and the flow of the fight just works perfectly. I haven't fought her that much, but I really feel like she could grow on me with more repeated attempts. On top of the really strong gameplay, the presentation is phenomenal, and conceptually this boss is just so creative. Lies of P does also have the Walker of Illusions, a fight I really enjoy that kind of fits the mold for this list, but for me it does just fall short of the Demon Princes. Still, the best Souls-like not made by From Software earns a respectable spot on the list with a really great gank in Markiona. While I found Nostra a serviceable yet unremarkable encounter, the Everdark Sovereign shoots up to the very pinnacle of Night Rain's boss roster. It takes a fight I didn't much care for and makes it a pretty great one. It begins with the original opening to Phase 2, which is the move I actually quite like, the drive-by. Once you whittle Fortis and Nostra's health down, the true Night Lord reveals itself. Animus Ascendant Light adds an entirely new flavour to the fight, revitalising it as a surprisingly well-handled FromSoft gank. It grants players the freedom to manipulate the boss to tailor the fight to their preference. If you've mastered Fortis Animus more, it might be better to let Animus revive it, or vice versa with Nosta. It's a great approach to managing multiple enemies. Very easily this fight could have become an overwhelming frenzy to survive against 3 different enemies, but instead it enhances the mechanics of the earlier fight. It's made more challenging, more interesting, somehow more visually impressive than it already was, and I still stand by Nosta's soundtrack being the best in the game, and one of the best FromSoft have ever released. I can't effectively describe why I love Animus so much more than the original Sentient Pest, but it's somehow managed to climb all the way to being the runner-up in my ranking of Night Rain's bosses. While I've beaten the main game of Hollow Knight, there's still a massive amount of content I've yet to experience. As such, I haven't fought Sisters of Battle, the enhanced version of this fight that everyone seems to universally prefer. Even so, the standard Mantis Lords are a really strong fight. Every attack they have is immensely satisfying to engage with, and has clearly intended responses for the player. It follows the old Bell Gargoyles technique of introducing you to the mechanics with a single enemy first, before later intensifying the battle with the second Mantis. When that second bug gets added to the fray, the fight can easily become very overwhelming, and the player is forced to make incredibly precise movements to position themselves safely. But there's never a situation where damage can't be avoided. Everything is within the player's control. Healing windows are admittedly very scarce in this fight, but there are clear opportunities that stay consistent every time, unlike in a fight like Gwyn, where your ability to heal entirely depends on what the boss decides to do. The Mantis Lords just execute well in every area of boss design, so while I don't find them to be an immensely impressive fight that stands with gaming's best, they are my favourite boss I fought in the original Hollow Knight, and easily one of the top 10 best ganks in gaming. Cuphead has some excellent bosses, Ribby and Croaks being one of the best. I'll probably do a boss ranking for this game at some point, but just know the Battletoads are near the top of the roster. While there's bosses I like more, I don't really consider the Howling Aces or Phantom Express true gank fights, since for the most part you're fighting a single enemy. But Ribby and Croaks definitely fit the bill, and they deliver everything a multi-enemy fight should. In both Phase 1 and 2, the frogs have a single attack each, which allows them to gel perfectly together with no fear of certain combinations leading to unavoidable damage. The orange fireballs aren't the most interesting attack, but they complement the boxing gloves very well. As with any good Cuphead boss, there's ample opportunities for parries. Phase 2 on paper is very similar to the first, but the frog's attempts to suck you in adds an entirely new dynamic to the encounter. Then there's the third and final segment, which takes away the gank element in favour of a single attacker, but makes the fight notably more challenging. It's a very interesting setup for a fight, and their visual identity is just as strong as all of the bosses in this game. Ribby and Croaks are just a really great boss from a really great game, and definitely deserve their flowers in the upper half of this list.
Ornstein and Smough are the best multi-enemy boss in the series, if you don't count the Twin Princes. This is perhaps the most iconic boss in all of Soulsborne, and it's easy to see why. From Software used all the tools at their disposal to create an incredibly balanced encounter, with the classic big and slow, small and speedy combo, the pillars in the arena helping to create distance. Everything comes together to make an incredibly enjoyable 2v1 encounter. The second phase is great as well, and I love the choice the player is given in which of the 2 powered up bosses they want to fight. This boss does suffer from Dark Souls' dated AI, but even so it stands as one of the absolute greatest bosses in the series. It's just unfortunate how badly Dark Souls falls off after this fight.
Where can I even begin with Abyss Watchers? This is a boss that truly showed just how amazing the Dark Souls 3 bosses could be. After the admittedly underwhelming early game of Dark Souls 3, and the frankly despicable location preceding this boss, Abyss Watchers is the moment Dark Souls 3 starts to get good. Really good. The soundtrack for this boss is amazing, and absolutely one of the most memorable tracks in the series. They're undoubtedly the most creative gank boss we've ever seen. The way they handle the Abyss Watchers fighting between each other and use it to balance the gank is just amazing. And as if the first phase wasn't good enough, the second phase adds a whole new level of intensity and spectacle to this fight. While this boss does get a fair bit easier after the first playthrough, there's no denying this is far and away one of the best gank fights From Software has ever made.
Wow. Just wow. I don't know where to start. Words can't capture the incredible fight that is the dancers. They execute on every element of boss design to perfection. Soundtrack, one of Hollow Knight's best. Visuals, so unique. Gameplay, the best part of the fight by far. It has 4 entire phases, each changing something slightly to spice up the fight. Its length makes it an endurance fight through and through, but you never get bored of engaging with these moves despite having to be so patient. You have to be keenly aware of the boss's patterns at all times or you'll get caught. But the rhythm of the fight is just so incredible, it never gets stale. I think that's what makes the gameplay stand out so much here. The rhythm of it. It has such a satisfying flow. It really does feel like you're part of a choreographed dance. Almost like the parry counter loop of Sekiro, the game with the greatest combat of all time. They only have 3 attacks to throw at you, which is good considering how long the fight can last. But it's what they do with this simplicity that works so well. There's such vast variety in the directions of their dashes, and while I did notice a few predetermined sequences in the mix, they can seemingly go anywhere at any time, but it somehow somehow manages to still be well balanced. They function almost like magnets, they always move in response to the other. Maybe that's a weird analogy, but I'm sure if you fought them, you understand what I'm getting at. This solves the biggest issue that plagues so many gank fights, being the boss's AIs not functioning well with one another, and leading to situations where the player cannot avoid damage. That's impossible here. There will always be plenty of safe places for you to stand. There's also the web-like frenzy of slashes that fills the screen, forcing you to find a gap and jump and hover within it to avoid them. It seamlessly makes use of all the techniques in Hornet's toolkit, and that's always a good thing. And the final attack, my favourite one, is where they come together in the centre of the screen and create an AoE of white slashes in the centre of the arena. It's honestly really easy to dodge and a great opportunity to get damage in, but will punish reckless players a great deal. But the reason I love it so much is how it presents lore through gameplay. So let's discuss the lore, the phenomenal, subtle lore. The dancers are mechanical creations of Farloom, designed as performance to welcome bugs to the Citadel, but their construction was so effective. They're such a perfect replication of life that they developed a soul. Not two souls, not one each, just one they share between them. And when we finish that third phase, cutting down one of the dancers, we shatter half that soul. The fourth phase ensues and we're compelled by our natural drive as gamers to mercilessly beat on this now virtually defenseless, broken half of a whole we destroyed. The score was already incredible, but here it transitions to a somber, despairing music box embodying the suffering of the surviving dancer. It's brutal, it's gut-wrenching, it's everything the lore of a video game boss should be. Personally, this scene resonated with me more than watching Sif limp around in Dark Souls, seeing the remaining dancer float to the centre of the screen, only to be unable to perform its attack without its other half, instead falling to its knees. Devastating. So yeah, this boss is truly something special. The design is one of the coolest and most unique I've seen in any game. The gameplay is stronger than nearly any other 2D boss. The lore is fantastic and actively plays a role in the mechanics of the fight. The cogwork dancers are simply perfect. That wraps up my list of the 10 best ganks in gaming history. While I'm sure it will be an incredibly controversial list, I stand by it strongly and truly feel that these bosses execute on the concept of a battle against multiple enemies far better than the majority of attempts at this formula. I encourage you to leave your thoughts in the comments below, as long as you're capable of doing so respectfully of course. I'd also appreciate some insight into what topics you'd like to see me cover in the future, since I want to put out videos my community is interested in watching. Thanks for watching, and I hope I'll see you next time.